Welcome back to the deep dive.
Hey there.
So today we are attempting something of a high wire act.
You could say that. Definitely one of our more eclectic stacks of sources.
It really is. We are going to try and draw a straight line between three things that usually have absolutely nothing to do with each other.
On the surface, anyway.
Right. We've got corporate middle management, the chaotic life of a design leader, and J.R.R. Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings.
But there's a reason for it. We're trying to solve a problem.
A problem I think everyone listening has felt. You know that moment you look at your inbox or you step into a meeting about a reorganization of a reorganization and you just feel the entropy.
The chaos. The feeling that the ground is shifting under your feet and you just don't have a map.
Exactly. So our mission today is to figure out how to lead through that, through all that ambiguity. How do you keep your team sane and productive when the world, or maybe just your upper management, is losing its mind?
And we're hitting it from three very different angles. First, we have the boots-on-the-ground view from an article by Corinne Hurt.
At Let's Grow Leaders.
Yep. She's tackling the really immediate tactical side of things.
Then we've got the in-the-trenches perspective from Katja Alyssa Mueller's Substack.
The piece called What the Hell Does a Design Leader Do All Day? Which is a great title.
It is. And then the heavy hitter.
A PhD thesis by Elizabeth Ann Wright from Oxford Brookes University, all about using fantasy literature as a framework for leadership development.
Which, I gotta be honest, when I first saw that title, I thought it was just a fancy excuse to read fantasy novels on company time.
Kind of sounds like it, but her argument is surprisingly rigorous. She basically says modern leadership training is broken because it assumes the world is stable.
Which it is not.
Which it is not. So she thinks we actually need unreal stories to teach us how to navigate reality.
I'm skeptical, but, I'm willing to be convinced. So let's start with that reality check. Let's start with Corinne Hurt and what you called the art of buffering.
Right, because she opens with a story that it perfectly encapsulates the job of a good manager.
The story of Brian.
The story of Brian, yeah.
So Brian is a former employee who calls Corinne 6 years after they last worked together.
Which is always a weird phone call to get.
Totally. I mean, my first thought is, okay, they want a job reference or they're about to sell me on some crypto scheme.
Or network marketing. But no, Brian called just to say thank you. He told her, I didn't realize it at the time, but now that you're not here, I understand how much you buffered us.
That word buffered, it really struck me. It's like it implies something harmful was coming at the team, and she just absorbed the impact.
That is the role, exactly. Hurt describes it as being a filter. She admits that at the time, she felt like she was constantly battling bullies and pushing back on what she calls stupidity from the top.
Stupidity is a strong word for corporate strategy.
But we've all been there.
We have. But here's my question. Where's the line where buffering just becomes lying? If I'm hiding all the chaos from my team, am I not just treating them like children?
That is the tension, isn't it? And she gets into that. If you hide too much, you're being paternalistic. But if you hide too little, you just paralyze them with anxiety.
So what's the answer?
She actually provides what she calls a filter mechanism to solve this exact problem. She breaks down what you should hide versus what you should share.
Okay, let's do the hide list first. What goes in the vault?
First and foremost, your own stress. The team does not need to see the panic in your eyes.
Right.
Second, the indecision of upper management. If the executives are, running around like headless chickens, passing that chaos down just helps no one.
So if the VP changes their mind 3 times in a single week, you only tell the team about the final decision.
Precisely.
Yeah.
You also hide the stupid hoops you had to jump through to get something approved, and you hide your own career struggles. You don't vent down.
Okay, so that's the shield, the buffering part. But to avoid that lying trap, what do you share?
You share the context, the big picture, and where they fit into it. And this is the most important part. You clarify which decisions are final and which are still up for discussion.
Oh, that's critical. Nothing drives me crazier than being asked for input on a decision that's already been made.
Exactly. It just creates cynicism. Hurt's point is that by filtering out the noise, the indecision, the politics, the drama, you aren't hiding reality. You're creating a space where focus is actually possible.
So the manager isn't a boss, really. They're more like a bodyguard for the team's attention.
Yes. She even quotes a former boss of hers, Gail Parsons, who said, where there is chaos, seize control. The idea is, in a leadership vacuum, you create a pocket of order for your people.
Okay, so step 1. Be the umbrella, keep the rain off the team so they can actually work. But that's a defensive move. It's about keeping the team dry, but it doesn't tell you where to march.
And that brings us to what the thesis calls the imagination gap. This is where we need to pivot to Elizabeth Ann Wright, because she argues that all the traditional business training, the spreadsheets, the SWOT analyses, the case studies, it all fails us when things get truly, truly chaotic.
Because it's all backward looking.
It's because it looks at the known world. It assumes that tomorrow's going to look a lot like today. But Wright talks about radically discontinuous situations.
Like a pandemic or a huge AI shift.
Exactly. You can't use a spreadsheet to navigate a reality that hasn't even happened yet.
And her solution for this is reading about orcs. I'm still struggling with the why here. Why does reading fantasy make me a better leader than, say, reading a biography of Steve Jobs? Wouldn't that be more practical?
You would think so. But Wright argues that biographies are actually too close to home. When you read about Steve Jobs, you bring all your existing biases about tech, about business. You're still trapped in your current worldview.
So I'm not really learning, I'm just confirming what I already think I know.
In a way, yes. Wright uses this concept called estrangement. Because fantasy takes place in a secondary world, a world that's impossible, with dragons and magic, your cognitive defenses go down.
Okay.
You stop worrying about quarterly earnings or HR policies, and you're forced to look at the raw ethics of power, of corruption, of survival.
So the fact that it's fake is what makes it useful. It strips away all the baggage.
Exactly. It functions as a cognitive firewall. It lets you run a simulation of a high-stakes ethical dilemma without any of the real-world risk.
Okay, can we make this concrete? Give me an example of one of these simulations that I get from reading Tolkien.
Okay, let's look at the concept of recovery. It's a term Tolkien himself coined. He said we get so used to the mundane world that we stop seeing it clearly. We take things like power and hierarchy for granted.
You go on autopilot.
We go on autopilot.
Right.
Recovery is like cleaning the windows so you can see again. So when you read about Saruman in The Lord of the Rings, you aren't just reading about a bad wizard. You are watching a leader who decides that order and efficiency are more important than the natural world, more important than people. He industrializes Isengard. He cuts down all the trees to feed his furnaces.
He optimizes for production at the expense of everything else.
Exactly. Now, if you read a business case study about a CEO cutting costs, you might just think, oh, smart move. But when you see it through the lens of Saruman, you feel the moral horror of it. It recovers your ability to see the ethical cost.
That is actually really compelling. It's like an emotional flight simulator. You crash the plane in the book so you don't crash the company in real life.
That's a perfect way to put it. And Wright outlines specific uses for this. One is exploring the external world, using untrue stories to tell the truth about power. Think about the Hunger Games. It's not about the future. It's a critique of media and control right now.
Or managing the other. That was another one she mentioned.
Yes. In almost every fantasy story, you have these disparate groups, elves, dwarves, men who, historically hate each other but have to form a coalition to survive.
Which is basically every cross-functional meeting I've ever been in. Engineering versus marketing.
Exactly. And the shadow aspect is huge, too. Fantasy forces leaders to confront their own potential for corruption. The ring isn't just a magic item. It's a metaphor for the temptation to use power to do good, only to end up becoming the very tyrant you were trying to fight.
So if Curran Hurt teaches us to buffer the team from the chaos,
then Wright teaches us that we need the imagination to see where that chaos is leading.
And to imagine a better destination.
And that's what Wright calls subcreation. Leaders are essentially world builders. You are taking the raw materials of your organization and trying to speak a new reality into existence. If you can't imagine a world different from the one you're in, you can't lead anyone there.
That bridges us perfectly to our third source. Because if anyone is tasked with imagining a new reality while dealing with absolute chaos, it's a design leader.
Enter Katja Alyssa Mueller. She wrote this piece about the reality of being a design lead, and she uses this really vivid image to describe
the Mid-Journey one.
The Mid-Journey one. She put a prompt into an AI image generator asking for a visualization of her to-do list.
And it came back with this image of a crazy long, totally illegible list just folding around the streets of London, as tall as the buildings. It's just overwhelming.
But as she points out, the sun is shining. It's a sunny, chaotic mess.
Which feels weirdly optimistic for a job that she admits is super confusing. She talks about the title confusion. Is she a creative director? A manager?
A head of design.
She settles on design leader and creative manager, which basically implies she has to wear all the hats at once. But what's fascinating is how she structures this chaos. She breaks it down into three pillars.
People, Design X business, and soft skills.
And people is straight out of Corinne Herc's playbook. Mueller talks about hiring, mentoring, but specifically about creating psychological safety.
Which connects directly to shielding from stupidity.
It's the same idea. You can't be creative if you're terrified.
Then there's Design X business. This is the bridge. This is where the leader has to be a translator, connecting the creative stuff to the business metrics. But she also lists storytelling here. She says you have to use storytelling to present, inspire, convince.
That's the world building again. From the thesis, you have to
Yeah.
tell the story of why any of this actually matters.
Exactly. But it's the third pillar where I want to pause because it creates a bit of a paradox. She lists soft skills, but her favorite term is sponge brain.
Sponge brain.
She says a leader needs to be constantly soaking up trends, technology, culture, behavior, whatever the sponge brain can soak up.
Okay, wait a minute. We spent the first half of this deep dive talking about buffering, about blocking things out, filtering the noise. Now Mueller is saying, be a sponge, absorb everything.
Right.
Aren't those two ideas in direct conflict? How can I be a filter and a sponge at the same time?
And that is the core tension of modern leadership, isn't it? If you block everything, you become obsolete. You miss the AI shift, you miss the market change. But if you absorb everything and just pass it all on, you overwhelm your team.
So, you have to be a selective membrane.
You have to be a sponge for information and context, but a filter for stress and noise. You need to soak up the complexity of the world so you can understand it. That's the PhD part. But then you need to distill it into clarity for your team. That's the Corinne Hurt part.
That sounds exhausting.
It is exhausting. That's why Mueller emphasizes resilience and self-reflection. If you don't have that cognitive firewall we talked about, that space to think and imagine, you'll just burn out.
This brings me to a concept in the PhD thesis we didn't touch on yet, but I think it's the key to making this whole system work. Wright talks about two types of organizations.
Oh, yeah. Paranoidogenic and philogenic.
It sounds super academic.
It does, but the application is, well, it's visceral. It's from a theorist named Boxer.
Let's break it down. Paranoidogenic.
A paranoidogenic organization is one that literally generates paranoia. It's a system where the dominant emotions are fear, envy, greed, and guilt.
So the Mordor model of management.
We joked about it, but think about it. In a paranoiogenic system, everyone is watching their back. Information is hoarded. Mistakes are brutally punished. If you're a leader in that system and you fail to buffer, if you let that fear cascade down, you destroy your team's ability to think.
Because you can't have a sponge brain if you're in fight or flight mode. You can't be curious if you're terrified.
Exactly. Curiosity requires safety, which leads to the second type, the philogenic organization.
Which means love generating.
It sounds a bit hippy-dippy for a business deep dive, I know, but what it really means is creating a context of affiliation, a place where it's safe to connect, safe to fail, and safe to imagine.
This is what Corinne Hurt was talking about with human connection and what Miller meant by psychological safety.
It's all the same thing. The art of buffering isn't just about being nice. It is about structurally holding back the forces that turn an organization paranoidogenic. You are literally holding back the fear so your team can exist in a philogenic bubble.
You are carving out a little piece of the Shire in the middle of a corporate battlefield.
That is the job. And it connects back to that idea of subcreation. If you're a leader, you're building a world for your team every single day, whether you realize it or not.
So the question isn't, are you building a world? It's, what kind of world are you building?
Precisely. Is the world you're building defined by the stupidity and chaos coming from above? Or is it defined by the clarity and purpose you are creating within the team?
That's a powerful way to look at it. It takes the passive role of middle manager and turns it into the active role of world builder.
And it requires all three of the skills we talked about. You need the filter from Hurt to stop the toxicity. You need the imagination from Wright to visualize a better alternative. And you need the sponge brain from Mueller to understand the reality you're actually operating in.
It's a lot to ask of one person, but I guess that's why they call it a deep dive and not a shallow paddle.
Indeed. Leadership is not for the faint of heart. But as all three sources show, it's a skill. It can be learned, practiced, and prismed.
Yes.
Even a math.
Well, I certainly have some thinking to do. I'm going to go look at my team and ask myself if I'm generating paranoia or,
Yeah.
well, love, or at least safety.
Safety is a very good place to start.
Thank you for listening. We hope this helps you navigate your own chaos, shield your team from the stupidity, and maybe, just maybe, build a slightly better world between the hours of 9 to 5. We'll see you next time.